So this is our fourth week, class 1. So the slides, they say now this week's slides are week 4A, and we'll have week 4B for tomorrow. So today, let me make this slideshow. So today we are going to talk about the points shown here, sending data from Postman to destinations. So when I say here sending data from Postman to destinations, you can think about automating sending data from, for example, a sister company to a parent company. Like, for example, or there is a hospital and patients' data, they want to automate sending it to the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, or to the Human and Health Services. Or when we say sending data, it also means, it could also mean when we interact with any applications. Let's say, for example, we consider Facebook. When we interact with Facebook, we like some photos, we dislike other or dislike other kinds of content, or upload our videos and so on. Then all these things are sent to Facebook's data lakes and data warehouses. Data lake and the data warehouse is an infrastructure where you store data and can efficiently analyze it, retrieve it and analyze it when you want it. So there are millions of applications where data is sent from the application to destinations in the cloud somewhere. In our case, we have not yet started sending data to cloud or to databases. In the coming tutorials, we are going to cover that. But for today, what we are going to see is we'll just send data from Postman, and our application should process it and save it to our computer. So you can think for now, the destination of the data is our computer. But it is something similar also, whether you send it, whether you insert it to a database, or you send it to the cloud, the approach is similar. So we'll see that. That is one application. And the other one, the second point, is when we send the data. So to get data, we say there are different HTTP messages, and to get data, we use the get message, and to send the data, we use post message to create a new object. So we are going to use post today. Last week we saw we used get. Today we are going to use post to send the data. And when we send data using post, we want to understand the Mule event. Understanding the Mule event is always important. If we understand the Mule event, how it is changing, then we can write any kind of application, even if we have not seen it before, or even if we have not worked on a similar thing before. And the other thing is, we talked about the Mule event structure last time, and we said it consists of messages which have under them variables and attributes, messages which have under them payload and attributes, and also we said a Mule event has variables. And today we are going to see one of the main uses of variables. Like, you can save a payload as a variable so that you can reference it, so that you can use it later in your flow. So this helps you. From overwriting your payload, because you have saved it as a variable. Even if you change the payload, or even if you overwrite it with something else, you can't get the previous payload because it has been saved to a variable. The last point that we are going to see is about, so in this case, we said we are sending data from Postman to destinations. So, for example, a hospital could be sending data to the FDA and other destinations, a couple of other destinations. And rather than sending the data sequentially, when we say sequentially, it means in sequence, sending to one organization, for example, first, and then after it completes sending to that organization, sending to another organization. That is what we mean when we say sequentially. And we have another better option, which is sending data concurrently, like parallel execution. So we are going to see how we can do both of them. This will be the main things that we are going to do today. And questions we can have QA time towards the end and discuss in detail. So first I will cover the content, and as you saw on the slides, probably today we don't have lots of theories. We will learn the concepts through hands-on applications. Okay, so
Are you recording?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for reminding me. Yeah. So when we say sequential, as I said, it means doing something in sequence. Like for example, if there are two jobs, and if each one of them takes 10 minutes, then the whole job to complete it will be the first 10 plus the second 10. It will take 20 minutes. So the time taken when we have a sequential execution in sequence, the time taken will be the sum of the time taken by each processor. In our today's case, we said we want to send data to destination, so we will send data from Postman. When we send data, the method we are going to use will be post. So, and we are going to use an HTTP listener. So the HTTP listener, when it gets triggered, it will get the payload from Postman. So the Mule event in this case will have a payload. Last time when we were using the get method, the HTTP listener, when it gets triggered, the Mule event, it had attributes like we were including query parameters and URI parameters, but it didn't have a payload. The Mule event were having payload after we read some data, but in the beginning, when the Mule event was triggered, there was no payload. But in today's case, since we are sending data from Postman, then the Mule event will have a payload. So in a Mule event structure, payload is the main data that the flow of the application processes. Then once the Mule event is triggered, we want to save it to a variable. Why are we saving it to a variable? For referencing it later, and we'll understand in the next components why we need to save it to a variable. So the first time, let's assume we want to, so the data we usually, for different reasons, one is for durability and other reasons, data we send it to multiple destinations and in multiple formats. So let's say now we want to save the data in CSV and JSON formats. So first we want to transform it to CSV and write it to CSV, then transform it to JSON and write it to JSON. Both these data files will be in our computer, but it is the same whether we send it to our computer or to the cloud also. So we'll transform it to CSV, and see here without a header, we will remove, when we write to CSV, we are going to remove the header. And the reason that we are removing the header is because since we are going to write, we will be continuously sending data. If we include the header, then there will be duplicate headers. Maybe let me open Excel file and show you what I mean here. So here, for example, I have the airport's data here. This one, let me open it. So what we are doing is, in our transformation, we want to transform it to CSV, and we want to remove the header. And the reason is, so the header is the first column. This is the header. This is the header. And let me create another sheet here. So in here, let's say first, this data, these rows are sent. And in our destination, we want to append all the data that are coming in. For example, data could be coming every hour, every day, it depends. So the first data that comes in is like this, let's say. The other data that comes in is, for example, let me delete these rows. And the other data that comes next are these rows. Now, if I just append them, these two, if I append them with the header, as you can see, this header is being duplicated. So for that, what we do is we remove the header, and the header usually we save it in a separate file. If we are appending data to a CSV file, we have to remove the header. So that is what we are doing in that flow. So okay, so here slideshow. So here we transform it to CSV without a header and write it to CSV without a header using the append writing.
Sorry, if your voice is.
Oh, you cannot hear me? Hello?
No, you're okay. You're good.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay. So here, yeah. So here we are writing it to CSV without a header because we will be appending data to the data file, continuously sending data. And to avoid the problem of duplicating the header, we remove it in our transformation. So next we want to transform to JSON, and we say JSON is key value pairs. JSON data has key value pairs. But in this one, if we are to transform, if we try to transform the payload in this case, we have removed the header, which means the keys have been removed. There are no keys. We just have only values. So in here, when we transform to JSON, we don't transform the payload, but rather we transform the variable. We reference the variable. We reference the variable that we created here. Maybe if you don't understand it here, when we create the application in real time, you will understand it. So once we create the JSON file, then we write the JSON file to this. So as you can see, this is sequential data processing one after the other, and the total time taken is simply the sum of the time taken by each processor. The other option, which is a better option, especially when we have large volume of data, is parallel processing. So in parallel processing, we have the data coming in from Postman. Then we have a payload when the Mule event is triggered in the listener. Then we use a router called scatter gather. If you have not heard about this, that's fine. We are going to, it is under the core module, I think. We will get it and create the application. So scatter gather, what it does is it sends the Mule event to different routers, and each one of them processes it in parallel. And then at the end, it collects the output, the final output. So scatter gather, we use scatter gather router here, and we have one route which is transforming to CSV and writing to CSV. The other route is transforming to JSON and writing to JSON. So the total time taken in this case for the scatter gather will be the total time taken by the scatter gather in this case will be the maximum time taken by either of these. So the maximum of the two. Like for example, if the upper row writing to CSV, transforming to CSV, and writing to CSV, if it takes 10 seconds, and the second one, if it takes 5 seconds, then for this scatter gather, the total time that it will take will be 10 seconds. Whereas if it is sequential, the total time taken will be 15 seconds, the sum of the two. So you can understand that parallel processing is, for this reason, very preferred when we process large volume of data, especially, for example, in the cloud when.
Doctor, the sound is breaking because we need this record. So sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay.
Your voice is really good. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I will try my best, but also check if there are some issues on your side also. But the recording should be fine. The video, when I upload it, because I'm talking in front of my computer, I think it should be good. I hope. Okay. So these are the difference between sequential and parallel processing. Mainly, the scatter gather is what we have seen here. Okay. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, my wife is also telling me there is a problem on my side. Okay, so.
Fish, I think it's not so serious. It's just only for a very short time you have some interruption. Otherwise, it should be okay.
Okay, thank you. So, okay, so we talked about sequential processing and parallel processing, and now let's create Mule applications and explain the properties and the concepts of each one of them on the way. So I have MuleSoft open here. You can just follow me, even if you have done gone over the slides and created the application. I think if you can follow here, there could be some concepts on the property configuration and so on that you may learn. Okay, so I have this one. Let me make it design view. I want to create, it says in the slides, we are going to create a Mule application called Send Data. So I go here, new project, and I call it Send Data, finish. So what we said is we are going to use HTTP listener because we will invoke it, we'll trigger it from the Postman. So we need an HTTP listener. We get it from HTTP. I have the listener here, drag and drop it to the canvas. In here, just click here and specify the configuration in the path. So the path, we can call it whatever we want. Let's call it send data. So because we will, in Postman, we will identify the specific application using this complete path. So as far as we are aware of that, we can give it whatever name we want here. I'm calling it send data. And the configuration, since it is in my laptop, as we say here, we can accept the default configuration because the port 8081 is free in my laptop. Yeah, so this is the default. If the port 8081 is not working for you, you can change it. But usually just accepting this default should be fine. The other thing that could be a source of error here that you have to be aware of is here, once you create one, don't click this add again. If you want to see this or to modify it, you just click this edit one, this edit button. If you click the add button, it adds another one. So you have two HTTP listener configurations with the same port, and it may fail saying that the port has been taken. So don't add, remove if you have added multiple also, remove those that you don't use, and just have only one HTTP listener configuration. Okay.
And I have a question. Can we use any time of the flow to bring the listeners?
Any kind of flow?
I mean the flow, when we are taking listeners, so can we take a flow first?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, from here first, you mean dragging and dropping this one, right?
Yes.
Yes, both of them are the same, yeah. When you take a flow, then it has a source, a processor, error handler. This one also, when you take from the code, when you take HTTP listener, it does the same thing. Okay. So in here, after this, what we said is, since there is data being sent from Postman, we want to save it as a variable. So from core, there is set variable here. So the payload, we are saving it for later referencing. We are making sure we don't lose the payload in our flow when we transform and process the payload. So we are saving it. So we are calling it data here. And here, we want to call it payload. We want to save the payload. If I don't click this fx, we say this is just a string. We have to click this fx to make it an expression, to switch it to an expression. So now I have saved my my data, the payload, as a variable, and I'm calling it data. Later on, when I want to reference this payload, I just use vars.data. We will see that. So to access variables, we use vars.variable name. Okay. So next, once we do this, we say, do we want to write it to CSV? And so to write it to CSV, first we have to transform it to CSV. So we go to transform message. See all these things. So every day I do coding, and all these things, if you were to code them yourself starting from scratch, it takes so much time. Whereas in MuleSoft, even it takes so much time, and it will not be as efficient as this also. But in MuleSoft, you see, so the drag and drop, it is abstracting for us, like writing lots of lines of code. So this transform message, the first one, we want to transform it to CSV because we want to write to CSV. The data that came from Postman, we want to transform it to CSV and write it to CSV. So here in the output, in the header here for the transformer, with the output should be application CSV. You see, this is the header part. And in here, we specify that the CSV should not have a header. So header is false. So I will not, the payload, it will just be the payload, which is the data sent from Postman without a header, is what we are saying here. The data that came from Postman with the header or the keys removed, that will be the CSV data. Okay. Give me a second. Probably let me disconnect my laptop, my Bluetooth connection. Probably that could be the problem. So if I go here, settings, Bluetooth is off. Okay, so it should be fine. Okay, so we transformed it to CSV. Here's the data that was sent from the object data that was sent from Postman has been transformed to CSV, and we have removed the header. Now we want to write it to disk, to the computer.
Fish, can you please go back to set variables?
Sure.
I missed that one second.
So yeah, you can go over the sliders. I have all the screenshot of each the sliders.
All right.
Yeah, so in here, I'm giving it a name called data, and we are saving the payload as a variable to reference it later. The only thing that we have to be aware of here is we have to click this fx to make it an expression, or we can put simply the # square bracket also. Okay, so next we want to write it. We want to write the data to disk. So in here, I don't have, as you can see, I don't have the write module. You can just click add module here if you don't have it. And there is file here, the file module. I drag and drop it here. And under the file module, I have the write operation. So once I bring the file module here, I have write operation here. Drag and drop it next to the transformer. So things are happening here in sequence. Okay, data came from an external tool, which is from Postman. It triggers this listener. The listener created a Mule event. That Mule event has attributes and a payload. That payload, we saved it to a variable because we want to reference it later. You will understand why. And the payload, we are transforming it to CSV. When we transform the payload to CSV, we are removing the header here because we want to append the data again and again. So we don't want to duplicate the headers. We removed them. Here, we want to write that data. The payload, we want to write it to this. And let's say I want to write it to here, for example, to this location. So you can simply copy the location, the path of the folder that you want to write your data to, and bring it here and give it a file name. So this one, for example, sentdata.csv. I'm calling it sentdata.csv. This sentdata.csv doesn't exist in my computer, right? Because I'm sending new data. Once I start sending data, yes, I will have some data in this sentdata file. But this data, it will be created the first time I send the data. And what am I writing to it? The payload. What is this payload? The payload is the output of this transform, as you can see. Output of this transform is a payload, and that payload is original data converted to CSV, and the header is removed. So now we have written this to CSV. We can rename this write CSV, write to CSV. So we are done now. Every time we send data now. Okay. And in this write operation, by the way, let's see the other thing that we have to pay attention here is the write mode. So the write mode by default is overwrite. Overwrite means replace what was there, and write the new one only. So we want to make this append. Like for example, if you have a database where we are saving data over time, you don't want to overwrite it. You just want to append. You want to add at the bottom the newly coming data. You want to add at the bottom of the data file that is already existing. So the right mode here, we are making it append. So this application by itself, it can work. And every time we send data from Postman, it will create a file called sentData.csv in this location. And every time we send data, it will be appending and it will keep growing. And if this has been sending, for example, if this has been sending to AWS, to Amazon Web Services, or to Google Cloud, I simply change this right to CSV connection. I drag and drop the appropriate connection for AWS, then specify the location and the file name and so on. So we have done this. Now we want to write it to JSON also. But in here we have the payload, we have modified it. The payload in this transform, it doesn't have keys, it is only values. So this one, the payload, if you try to transform it to JSON, it will fail because JSON needs key value pairs. So if we see, to remind you for those of you especially who were there in the first classes, when we say JSON data, it is something like this. So in Excel, each row, if we compare quickly as a reminder, if we compare Excel versus CSV or Excel for that matter, they are the same, the structure. If we compare CSV versus JSON, in CSV or Excel, we have the header here, and then we have different rows for different observations here. And in Excel, in JSON, to represent this Excel in JSON, what we do is each row will be an object in JSON. Each row will be an object like this, as you can see. This one is one row. This one is another row, and so on. And the curly bracket or the curly braces here are called, this one within curly braces is called an object, which means it is called an object because it represents one entity. It is about one thing. Like in this case, it is about this airport. And as you can see, in Excel, we're not repeating the headers, but here, the keys, we repeat them. And we can have different keys for each object. It is not, they should not necessarily be the same. And all of these keys, all of these objectives together, when we put them in square bracket, it is called an array, we said. So anyway, I brought this because to transform the data to JSON, we are trying to create key value pairs. But in here, when we transform it to CSV, we have removed the headers, so we don't have keys. So that is why we need to access this variable, because this variable, it contains the original payload. So I can go now to core, bring transform message again. Oh, sorry. Let me remove this. Delete. Bring transform message again to here. So this transform is to JSON. We are transforming to JSON, and here the output should be to JSON. And here, rather than the payload, what we are transforming is vars dot. As you can see, when I start vars dot, it shows me the different variables I have. It is only data that I have now. I have saved the variable as data. I think we can also give it more descriptive variable name. So this is the original payload anyway. So we are this original payload, it has key value pairs. So once I do this, I can again go to the write module and bring to the file module and bring the write operation and drag and drop it here. And this is to JSON, write to JSON, and give it a path the same way like before. So I was writing to here, copy the path and paste it here and give it a name, send data.json. So this file doesn't exist. This file doesn't exist in the beginning, but once we start sending data, it will be there. and we can send data again and again, and it should append it to it. The data that we send should be appended to the original data that was there. Okay. So this is, as you can see, this is sequential. I think this should be self-descriptive. So once we do that, let's add a logger. Usually we use loggers so that we can get messages on the console to see if our application worked as expected or if there are any errors. So under core, I have logger here. It just prints to the console, and the message, let's say, I can call it data sent successfully, for example. So this data sent successfully message will not be printed to the console if the previous operations didn't work appropriately. Okay, and final one, let's create another payload. So the payload, when we send data from Postman, we want some kind of update to get back to Postman. And that one, it could be a status, some kind of status. So that payload I'm creating using transform message, and here, so this one, I will make it JSON, and it will be an object. So here, let's key value pairs, right, for objects. So message key value. So we use colon, as you can see. So data written T, is it double T or the team? I don't know. Successfully, for example. Then when we different key value pairs, we separate them using comma. So I want to add code also, status code. We discussed about the different status codes we have, and 200 means okay, that means it worked fine. So this one is the final payload. As you can see, output payload, it says here. So this final payload, at the end, it will be returned back to Postman. It will tell us that data has been written successfully. So let's add breakpoints to here, and we will run it in debug mode. So I can add a breakpoint here so that we can see what the Mule event, the first Mule event created by the listener looks like. Then add, I guess, just we can quickly check it one time. Probably this class, I think we may not finish it today. We will go over it again tomorrow. The remaining part we can cover it tomorrow. It is better if we understand this concept, especially in the beginning, about the Mule event structure and so on. Once you understand the nitty-gritties of the first concepts, the rest are very similar. Okay, so I added breakpointers. Why do we add breakpointers? We add breakpointers so that we can run it in debug mode, so that it doesn't complete the whole flow, and it can stop before processing, before reaching the breakpoint. Like in this case, for example, when it gets triggered, until I click the next button, it will not go to the set variable and so on. So okay, now this one, I just right click here and just click debug project send data. So until this one gets deployed, until it gets ready and all the resources get ready, you can ask questions and we can discuss. Anyone who has questions?
I have one.
Sure, go ahead, please.
So when we try to run it, something like the last project we did, if we get an access denied from our end, what does that mean? Like does it mean like it's not inside the environment or something?
Probably, yeah, the path. So that is for the API full address. The full address is either it means the full address is not correct, maybe the port number or the path, or it could mean also it is not maybe deployed. So I would check if it is deployed successfully, if it shows successfully, if it has been deployed. In this case, for example, let's see, it says, if I go to the console, it says deployed. If it says failed, that means it didn't work. So that is one thing that I will check. The other thing that I will check is in here, I will check the path. So the full URL will be, we said, the HTTP protocol, which is either HTTP or HTTPS. In this case, we use HTTP, then colon, then the host. If it is in your laptop, it is localhost, followed by the port. So you have to make sure the port is 8081 also, or whatever it is, whatever port you have here, and then the path. I will check those things, and it should work if you put these things appropriately.
Okay. And another question. I'm sorry to take up your time, but oh crap, I forgot.
That's fine. We can discuss towards the end, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so this has been deployed. That means it is ready. When we say deployed, it has prepared all the resources, the server and everything. And now this listener is listening to an external world, and it can be invoked. Okay, so I go to Postman, and in here, the path, we have to make sure we put the appropriate path. It is send data. So I will bring send data. The rest in my Postman, since I was experimenting with it, I have the HTTP localhost port number is 8081. Then I bring the path. So this one, if I do like this, now my app will listen to it. But since we are sending data, the other important point for today is, since we are sending data, we don't use get. Get is for getting data, and post is for sending data. So for sending data, we use post method. And we want to send the data, and you can send whatever data I have, but since we have the airport data for the tutorial that we created, let me open it, and we will send different objects. So I want to, I can copy this first, for example. But before that, we have to specify the data type that we are sending actually. So pay attention here. I go to headers, and let me remove this. So under headers, we have key value here. For key, if you start putting content, so you will get content type here. And for value, you put if you start typing application, there is application JSON. So this helps it to know what data we are sending. So this one, we specify it in the header. So once we specify this, we go to body here. And in here, assume there is no data. So the data that I want to send is this one, the first object, for example. I copy it without this comma. I don't need that comma. I bring it and paste it here. So in this case, I'm just sending information for this airport. And this information, it could be my Facebook interactions. I have my Facebook username, what I liked, what comments I wrote, and so on and so on. It can be sent in this format. Now I click send. So before, in our last class, when we use get, when the first listener gets triggered, we saw it was creating query parameters and URI parameters if we include them, but it didn't have payload in the beginning. Now it will have a payload. Pay attention. So if we click send, because we are sending data, and that is what payload is, click send. And by the way, when you use Postman in debug mode, and if you since you may take more time here, it may time out. So to avoid that, you go to File, Settings, and increase. There is request timeout. Oh yeah, this is new one. So let me add. You can just put a big number here so that it doesn't time out. Okay. So now, did I click send? No. Okay, click send. So now it has sent it has sent the request, and it is waiting for a final response. If we come here, we see the listener listened, a Mule event got created because we see the components of the Mule event here, the payload, the attributes, and the variables, even if there is no variable. And also it has stopped, the execution has stopped before executing set variable. It has stopped here. If you see this dotted rectangle, it means it has not yet executed that component. If now we want to pay attention to the payload, do we have a payload? If I click here, you see I have a payload for this airport that I sent. So this data, I can process it in any way I want, and either enrich it by joining with other data sets, filter it, aggregate it, and write whatever I want to my destination, or I can just look at this data, and if there are some metrics that are anomalous, that are worth paying attention to based on some metric, I can send alerts, for example, to some people. I can send emails that I got this data, but this column looks it looks unhealthy. Can you go check? Can you go take this action? It can be, you can send a text message in MuleSoft itself. You can send text messages to phone text messages, or you can send emails. So you see, we have this payload in the beginning. Okay, so now and the other thing is, see this virus, we don't have any variable, size 0. When I click next here, next processor, a variable will be created. We'll see one variable. See, now the size has become 1, and this variable is data, and its value is the original payload. We are saving the original payload for the later. Okay, click next processor. Now we transformed the original payload to CSV. See here, now the keys or the headers have been removed. We have only values. So this payload, if we try to transform it to JSON later, since it doesn't have keys, it doesn't work. That's why we are using the variable to save the data. Okay, so now I write it to CSV. So let me show you my folder here. I don't have, so the file name we gave it is sentdata.csv. As you can see, there is no sentdata.csv. So once this is executed, it will create that file name and write the data to it. So go next. Now the data should have been written here. Let's go check here. Here is sent. Yeah, it should be sent data. So anyway, this is the data. And if we click it, you see there are, these are the values we sent without a header. Now if there are other messages coming in, it can be appended here, and it keeps growing. Okay, now we have written the data to CSV. Next, we want to transform it to JSON. So this one, the payload, you will see it will change to key value pairs again, because we are using the variable. So click next. You see the payload now changes to key value pairs, and I can write it to JSON. And I have this logger. This logger now, since all the previous components processors have processed successfully, this logger will log to the console that that data has been written successfully. So first, let me clear this console so that we can clearly see the log. Next, see here, if I scroll to the right, data sent successfully. What we just wrote here for the message. So that means this shows us everything is working fine. And at the end, we have this payload, which is a message, a status message, which will get back to Postman. So click next. Now, if I get back to Postman, as you can see, I have got the message. Message data written successfully, code 200. This is final message, and this final message is what we put in this transformer. So now we are able to write the data to CSV and to JSON. Let's see if the JSON data also. The file name is sentdata.json. So as you can see, I have sentdata.json here. I can open it. It should have key value pairs. I can append data to it. Again, if I send data, it will be appended to it. So now this is a Mule event structure. We saw how, as it flows, as it travels through the flow, how it changes. Now I just want to run it in without in the design mode, without debug mode, so that we can send more objects and see as it appends the data to the data files. So I will stop this, or what I can do is just remove breakpointers here. Remove breakpointers. And don't have any breakpointers here, and change this to design, Mule design, so that this upper rectangle goes away. Let's see if it does. Okay, So now let me send another object, for example, and the airports.json is this one. And let me send this one, for example, or I can send the same object also again and again. It depends on the application. Usually we have data, we have an application in place that checks if there are duplicators, but in this case we don't. So we can send the same object also again and again. But anyway, let me paste this here. And as you can see, I have opened the CSV file and the JSON file here. So the new data that I will send will get appended. Send data. So I got this message. That means it was written successfully. I can send the same object again and again. Let's send it again and again. I want to show you as the data file size in this keeps growing. You can think of this as my Facebook or my interaction with Twitter and all my interaction being sent to their data servers. Okay, so now if I can, you see the data size has increased here. I can see the size. Before it was bytes, now it has become kilobytes. And also if I open here, it tells me the original JSON file, it was only one object. Now here it is telling me the file has been modified by another program. Do you want to reload it? If I click yes, I will see more objects here. So you see it has increased. All the data objects that we sent, it was being appended here because we used append write mode. This one also the same thing. The CSV file especially, as it gets appended, it is neat, as you can see here, since it doesn't have a header. So you see, yeah, I was sending the same airport data. That is why we see all these things duplicated, because I copied one object and just clicked send. So this is sequential execution. And to change this to parallel execution, rather than first writing to CSV and then writing to JSON, what we can do is, let me just modify this one and show you. Under core module here, we have different routers. We will see, especially the most useful ones, we will see them one by one because they are common in interviews, in certifications, and also in real-world applications. So one of them is scatter gather. For today, let's just drag and drop scatter gather. So the scatter gather, it does the processing in parallel, we said. So now once I do this, I can bring the first together and drag and drop them here. See how cool it is. If it was modifying the code, it will take so long time. But this one, since it is drag and drop, let me drag and drop the first one first. Stop. Yep. You wait until you see a vertical line here. So if you see a vertical line, that means it is working. Okay. Next, bring this next to the transformer. This one, I bring it again here. I wait until it creates a black vertical line. It did. Then I bring this next to this transform to JSON operation. Bring it here. And then at the end, this logger and transform, they can be outside of the scatter gather. Okay, so this scatter gather, what is it doing? So there are two parallel executions. One is writing to transforming to CSV and writing to CSV. The other one is transforming to JSON and writing to JSON. The same event, the same payload in this case, will be sent to both of them in parallel or concurrently. So in this case, we don't need saving a variable. We don't need saving the payload to a variable because it is not sequential. The same payload will be sent to both routers. Okay. Now here, rather than making vars.data, I can simply write the payload because the original payload has not been modified. So this is parallel execution, as you can see. And we can have different, you can think of its applications here, for example. I may want my data, I may want to send it to my company database, to AWS, and also to Google. then I can do this in parallel. Some part of the data to some locations as a data, the other part of data to another location, or the same data also we may save it in different places for different reasons. So parallel execution because of this is preferred because it takes less time. It is more efficient. And there are even other ways to make this more efficient we are going to discuss in coming classes. So this one, is it running? Okay. So when if the project has been modified and the project has been deployed, and if you modify the flow, then you come to the console and see if it has, in some cases, in most cases, I think it updates the changes, but some of them you may need to stop the project and rerun it. So here, what do I have? I don't see here it has modified. So what I can do is simpler thing, stop this and clear the console and run the project. So you can practice about this one also. You can add breakpoints and track the Mule event as it moves and how it changes and so on as an exercise. But since we don't have much time, I'll just run this project and send sample data until it deploys. I will take a couple of questions. Let me remove this data file names again. We make sure it has created. We make sure it creates new data files, and I will correct the file name here for this one. Sent data.csv for this one. Sent data.json for this one. Okay, perfect. So this one it is deploying, and so this is scatter gather parallel execution rather than doing it one after the other. Both of them are done in parallel or concurrently. Any questions so far?
I have one question.
Sure.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Before we change from sequential to scatter or to parallel,
Yeah.
can we save the first one?
Yes. Yeah. By the way, in your case, since you want to practice this, you create another flow. So what you can do is create another new project. This one, call it send data sequential. The other one, call it send data parallel. Because you want this, it is good. It is good if you don't delete or override the different projects you create. So yeah, that's a good question. Give them different names and have them separate. Okay, so since we have Kahoot time to use our time, let me send data and show you this one.
Fish,
Yeah.
I have one question.
Sure.
So on the listener,
yeah,
when we try to modify like the only post, it's not let me update the alarm method.
Okay. Thank you very much. I forgot one important thing here. Yeah, thank you very much. So when we send data for the listener, if you go to advanced, our load methods are get and post by default. That means it works for both get and post by default. Usually we specify if we want it to be get only, I just make this just get, so that it will be get only. And if I want it to be post only, I just write post. And in our case, we want it to be post. So
yeah, but it doesn't let us. I don't know, for some reason it's like active. It doesn't let me.
Is that?
I don't know. It's showing me like that.
Have others also encountered this issue?
No, it's working.
I have mine.
No.
I have mine too. If you want me to share my screen, then I'll show you.
Yeah, we can do that later. I think. Let's finish this first.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask you a different question?
Haptish, sorry, let me finish first and do the Kahoot.
Right.
Then those of you who have time and who want to stay, we can continue. Yeah.
Right.
To be with our time. Yeah. So okay. Now, yeah, this has deployed. The same way we can send data now. I go to here. Remember specifying the data types that you are sending. Actually, we could also make this CSV data. Now let's send the CSV data. Yeah, practice with sending CSV data, but to save time, I will just send I will send the same object to save time. Okay, because I will have to modify some things. Send. So as you remember, I have deleted the data files, the data files that I created from the sequential flow. I deleted them. So now this is from the parallel execution. The parallel execution is especially useful if you have large volume of data. For such things, it doesn't make any difference. But there are cases where we have to process millions of rows, and if you try to do that sequentially, it could take days or hours. And parallelism saves your day. So if I come here, as you can see, I have data files here, and I can open them. See this one, for example. It is the same airport that I just sent. The CSV also, if I open it, see just the same one, the same object. So this is sending data using post. Let's go to Kahoot questions now, and then questions. I will take questions after Kahoot. The Kahoot questions are, I'm trying to prepare them in a way, they are very similar to the certification questions. If you pay, I'm trying to say pay attention to the Kahoot questions, study them. The certification questions and the interview questions are very similar to them. So I hope the Kahoot questions are helping. Okay. So I have Kahoot for today and tomorrow. Today we have 5 questions. So some questions also, since they are long, I didn't include them in the Kahoot, but I have them in the PowerPoint slides. So you can go read them. The other thing before going to the Kahoot, actually, what I want to cover is, we have not covered this yet, but when you create a flow by dragging and dropping here, it creates code for you. So there is a code it is generating here. When I add one component here, this XML code gets modified. Or when I remove one component from here, also the XML configuration file gets modified. So you can, once you get very good at MuleSoft, also even without dragging and dropping, you can just modify this code. You can write your code your own, but I don't see a reason. Most of the time the drag and drop is more efficient, but there could be sometimes a reason where you have to write the code yourself or modify this code, but that is very rare. But you should be at least be able to understand this file at a high level. See, for example, here what do we see? You see this part, it says it is data with 2, which is the MuleSoft code. And here you see output application CSV. The output should be CSV, and it should not have a header, it says. So in a question, it can show you this one, and it may tell you, does the CSV have a header or no? It should be easy to see this and understand. No, it should not have a header. Or it can ask you, is the data being written to CSV or to JSON? I can see this, and I can tell that it is being written to CSV, not to JSON. And in this one, the data is being written to JSON. By mistake, the file name here, I can call it, I can give it sent data.json, for example. But here, since it is being transformed to CSV, the data will be still CSV. Let me show you what I mean. So, because there is one such question that I wanted to understand. So, see this one, it is CSV data, right? It is comma separated, and the extension is .csv. However, even if I save it as, let me open it again, and save as, the file name, the file name, even if the file name is, even if I write it as sent data.json, still the content will be CSV. It will not be JSON. So let me see if it works here. Save as, go here, JSON, yeah, there is JSON. So for those of you who use Windows, this is Notepad++, so it is a good editor. Sent data to, let me call it so that it doesn't overwrite the other one. So here I called it, I saved it as sent as JSON, as you can see. It is this one, sent data to. It is a JSON, But actually, is this data JSON? If I ask you, is the data actually JSON? No, it is not. It is CSV internally. I could save it by mistake as JSON, but the data actually is CSV. And why am I showing this? There is one question usually that comes in the certification and the stuff. So see this one. So what is it showing? It is showing file is being written. So it transforms the data and writes the data, and the file name is records.csv. It is writing it as records.csv. So by just seeing the file name, you can't tell whether it is CSV or JSON. You have to rather go to the XML code and see. And you see here here towards the bottom, it says the output is application JSON. So the question here, what will be the output of this one? Refer to the exhibitors. What is written to the records.csv? You may say, this is .csv and the content should be CSV, but actually it is not. You have to see the code. So the XML code, even if you are not required to write it, there are such questions at a high level. The key parts of the XML you should be able to understand. So for this question, is the contents of records.csv, is it JSON or CSV? Who can tell?
JSON.
Yes. And what's the reason?
The key value and also output.
Yes.
XML is reading.
Yes, this one, yes. In the code, it says, in the XML code, it says explicitly, it is saying output is application JSON. Yeah. So this is one question. Now we can go to Kahoot and start playing. Start. Oh. So this is the code. Game pin, I mean. I think today Desalegn didn't join. Desalegn, did he join? I don't see you. Okay, so we have 80 people. From 80 people, let's see how many people join for the Kahoot questions. Perfect, let's get started, I think. So starting. So this is about scatter gather. If you have two routers, one takes 15 seconds, the other one 20. How long does the scatter gather take to complete? Yep, the maximum of the two. So if there is a running competition, for example, there is running competition in the field, two people are running, then for the game to end, the total time taken will be the time taken by the slower one. So in parallel processing, the route that takes the most time will be the total time because the other route has completed already. So 20 seconds, yes. So a payload is saved to a variable. This is similar to what we saw last time. This is kind of duplicate. How do we access variables? We also saw it today. Perfect. Many people are following. That's good. So variables, we access them using vars.variable name. Attributes, query parameters, we access them using attributes.query parameters its specific name. And URI parameters, we access them using attributes, .URI parameters, .URI name, and so on. So remembering those things is good. Wow, Frey and Fetawi are on the top of the board. So you want to send data from Postman to a destination. What method do you use? The faster you are, the more points you will get. So if you already know it, be fast. Cool, yes. Get is for getting data, not for sending. There is no update method and there is no create method. Cool. Well, this is last one. So we saw this in the debug mode. When the message is passed, the mid event passes from the HTTP listener to the processor as sent data as the payload. Yes, we just saw in this session. So when we send data from Postman, the HTTP listener, by the first time it creates a Mule event, the data sent is the payload, and we process that payload because that data sent is what we want to process. That is the intention that the data is being sent. Okay. This is the last one. Oh, I have another question. Cool. 5 of 5, yeah. So this is multi-select. That means you have to choose more than one. Which of the following are not part of a Mule event? Cool. Yeah. So by the way, I was showing a donkey, kind of a mule here. So the reason that they called the tool MuleSoft is to mean let's do the heavy lifting for you ourselves and focus on your business, on solving your business problem. So they are saying we solve the heavy lifting part of your work is what they mean when we call it MuleSoft, and it is part of, if you heard of Salesforce, another company, Salesforce acquired MuleSoft and also Tableau. So they are sister companies. Tableau and MuleSoft are sister companies of Salesforce. By the way, after some time also I'm thinking of teaching business analytics, data analytics, and business intelligence with SQL, Tableau, and Python also. So you can think about that if you have interest in learning those data analytics and business intelligence and business analytics. Okay, so that is all. I think I have all the questions covered. Okay, so let's discuss about the Mule for events. The Mule for event structure, we said it contains a message, and that message has payload and attributes. It contains also variables. It doesn't contain inbound properties or outbound properties. These were part of a Mule 3 event. Mule 4 event Mule 4 has significantly changed. So software is from one version to the other. Usually they don't make significant changes, but in sometimes there could be very huge changes. So Mule 4 is, because of that, the significantly different from Mule 3. So if you see this question and if you see inbound properties or outbound properties, this should be the answers. Perfect. Podium time. The Stalem is always in the podium. Pasquale, the same. Thank you guys for participating. Thank you so much. And YBT is on the top. Cool. Thank you very much. So now I can stop this and I can stop this and take questions of Kahoot. I will also stop recording.